Welcome to part 4. Also, we have another role, and that is the job description of a treasurer. Now, let's take a look at the treasurer. The treasurer has the responsibility of maintaining the knowledge of the organization and has a personal commitment to all of its goals, especially making sure that the finances of the organization are ran and carried out in a proper way. That entails making sure that there are proper systems that are in place to ensure that the organization is able to account for the monies that are coming in and out of the organization. So this person tends to oversee the finance committee in most cases. They serve as the financial officer for the organization. The treasurer also has a responsibility of managing the finance committee, as well as reviewing other documents and making sure that the board is aware of their financial responsibilities as it relates to the organization. The treasurer also works with the executive director, as well as with the financial officer within an organization, to ensure that all of the funds and reports that need to be made are made on a very timely basis. This becomes critical, especially ensuring that people that have made donations, receive those donations, reports, so that things just make sure that the organization has a great image out in the public. Because one of the things that can destroy the credibility of any organization is the misappropriation of funds. And so the treasurer has a responsibility of ensuring that these things are done well. Also, they are the ones that review the annual audits of an organization. Now, a lot of smaller organizations that have smaller budgets will not be required to necessarily do an audit, but the financial treasurer will also make sure that the other proper reports that need to be done for those smaller organizations are done, as well as with the larger organizations that they need to do an audit, that they make sure that they do those as well. Now, let's take a look at the job description of the secretary. Again, this person has a responsibility of making sure that they attend the meetings, as well as serving on the executive committee. So we've seen real quickly that the treasurer, as well as the secretary, as well as the chair and the vice chair, will comprise that element of the executive committee. This is one of the few committees that is a standing committee within most nonprofit organizations. They have the responsibility of maintaining the records and making sure that they're accurate and kept in a safe place. Now, that doesn't mean that the secretary has to be the one that takes down all the notes in the meeting. You can bring in actually someone else to do that. But the secretary is responsible for making sure that they're kept and that they're accurate. These are also the people that are responsible for reviewing the board minutes. And I want to pause here to say that board minutes should be exactly that. Board minutes, not board books and board movies, because what happens a lot of times is that people take the board minutes and make them so long that no one in the world but the person who has to write them will ever read them. So those board minutes should simply record not what's being said throughout the entire meeting, but should only record those things that the board has made decisions on. And so you want to look at some good examples of that. You can go on the web, find some of those resources, but you want to make sure that whatever you do, that you get some real tight minutes that should be no longer than one, at the max 2 pages in length. And keep those on file, and that is the responsibility of the secretary. The secretary also has responsibilities of providing notices of meetings to the board committee whenever those are required, as well as assuming the responsibility of the chair in the absence of the board chair, as well as the vice chair. So if neither one of those individuals are present, then the secretary is the next person that will step in to fill in the gap. Now, let's take a moment to look at the job description of the executive director. The executive director has the responsibility of being the chief staff member for the agency. This is the person that hires, fires, and manages the staff. Now, I want to reiterate this point, that this person has the responsibility of hiring, managing, and firing staff as need. This is not the responsibility of the board of directors. The board of directors actually are the ones that hire the executive director, and they must make sure that they keep their distance and space and allowing the executive director to fulfill his or her responsibilities as it relates to overseeing and really managing the staff. So the board might be involved in some of the elements of helping to secure good staff, but they don't have the responsibilities of overseeing and hiring and managing. That is the responsibility of the executive director. The executive director has a big picture look for the agency, which include many of the day-to-day operations. So remember again, we were saying that the board of directors is responsible for looking long-term, whereas the executive director is more focused towards those things that are short-term, the day-to-day tasks. So this person leads the agency. They are the ones that help to fulfill the mission that has been given and conveyed to them by the board of directors. This person also has a responsibility of working not for one board member, but for the entire board. So no one board member should be trying to lead and guide this executive director. This is something that is a collective effort for the entire board. This also, as the executive director of a particular organization, has a responsibility of facilitating the work of the board as well as the committee. They facilitate it, they don't do it. And so it's going to be imperative, if you're going to build a board that you always want, that the board realize their roles and responsibilities, and they realize the responsibilities of the executive director, and that they don't cross paths. And so when there's an executive director that's doing what the board should be doing, it's incumbent upon that executive director to point out, no, this is not my responsibility, as well as for the board to do vice versa. The executive director has the responsibility of also keeping the board abreast of the fiscal affairs of the organization and providing some oversight for those as well. They are the ones that also attend those monthly meetings along with the board, as well as providing reports to the board. Now, here's something that is really important for us to point out. Executive directors sometimes serve on the board, but I want to recommend to you on today that in most cases it is not in the best interest of a executive director to serve as a board member. Here's why. When you have a board member that is serving as an executive director, in most cases, and in a lot of cases, those executive directors are getting compensated. And so what happens anytime a board member receives compensation, they lose an element of their immunity. In fact, when any board member begins to receive compensation from the organization, it's like that umbrella that they have of protection is literally thrown away. Because what the government says, it's going to be kind of hard for you to govern the organization in the best interest of the organization when you're personally benefiting from it. So that's why in most cases you have a board of directors that oversee and hire, fire, and manages the executive director. And in most cases, the executive director does not serve as a board member. Now, they may attend, of course, the board meetings and help to work with the board, but the board governs itself as well as oversees the executive director. Another thing that will be real important for us to point out for the executive director as a role and responsibility with their job description is the fact that the board executive director has a responsibility of sharing the truth with the board at all times, even when the board doesn't want to hear it. These are the individuals, the executive directors that train the staff and assist the board members. And then these are also the ones that are at the forefront and responsible for the media as well as public relations, as well as publicizing the affairs of the organization. The board member has a responsibility of fundraising for the organization, engaging the board in that fundraising effort as well. So it's not solely the responsibility of the executive director to raise funds. Now, if your organization is really going to become a high-performing board, it's going to be incumbent upon the board to make sure that the board is engaged in the fundraising process. And it's not just the responsibility of the executive director. Now, another responsibility that the board, the executive director has, is to make sure that the board is aware of when there is a public relations emergency and to make sure that they meet immediately so that they can begin to rectify the matter. And finally, the executive director has a responsibility of making sure that they resign in an orderly manner and that they don't do the work of the board, but they allow the board to do its work, and when it's time to resign, that they do it in a manner that's going to be in the best interest of the organization. Those are some of the main responsibilities of an executive director. This concludes part 4. Take a break or soar on to part 5.